Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 8th episode of GradLab on Demystifying Academia. I'm Joseph Green, chair of the IEEE-HKN Graduate Student Subcommittee, and your host for this episode. For those of you joining us for the first time, GradLab is an open resource sponsored through the IEEE-HKN Honor Society to provide graduate students with tips, tricks, and perspectives not often discussed in a classroom to help you thrive in your program and plan the next steps of your career. Today's guest is Dr. Hulya Kirkici, chair of the Electrical and Computer Engineering Department at the University of South Alabama. Over this webinar, she will guide us through her perspectives on what it's like to transition from being a graduate student to being a full-time professional in academia. Afterwards, we will open up the call for a live Q&A with all of our attendees here today. So get those questions ready. For now, help me in welcoming Dr. Kirkici.
Joe, thank you so much for this great introduction, and thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. And I hope we will have more interactive session, and I love talking to the students. But as Joe mentioned, I am the chair of Electrical and Computer Engineering Department at the University of South Alabama, and I am also a member of the Board of Governors of HKN. And I also chair the HKN Alumni Engagement Committee. I know our focus today is not really specifically what HKN is or is not, but I am going to do my pitch on HKN. And it is really an honor to be a member of HKN. That's an honor society. And I am going to go over my background. I was not an electrical engineering student as an undergraduate, so I did not have the opportunity to join HK or invited to join HKN when I was undergraduate. But once I started teaching at the university in electrical engineering department, my students actually nominated me to be a member of HKN as a professional member, and that's how I became an HKN member. So if you are not an HKN member, please find out how you can be nominated and how you can become an HKN member. That's a great honor to be part of this great organization. So I want to just very briefly talk about my career. Simply because it will set the stage for you and understand what it means to be in academia. And like I mentioned, I am a long-time volunteer for IEEE, as well as I am a academic leader. And I have 24 plus years at Auburn University. That's another university here in the state of Alabama. And then I became the chair of South Alabama Electrical Engineering Department here at South Alabama, and that's a promotion that I moved to this location. Now, as I mentioned, I also will talk about the women in engineering as being the first woman tenure track hired into ECE at Auburn University, and the first and only one went through the academic ranks at Auburn University. I have seen several interesting circumstances and a lot of support from many other colleagues and many people that I work with, and external and internal to the university. So those are really, really good things. So as many of you know, we don't have many women in engineering, so it is our really duty to propagate the message that as long as you are talented in engineering, you are fit to be an engineer. So there's no fear being a woman or being a man if you can fulfill a specific job or not. As going through my academic ranks, and I spent a couple of sabbaticals in different locations, one at NASA, Marshall Space Flight Center, the other one is at Air Force Research Laboratory, and I also served in academic roles as well. So moving forward, this is going backwards. Moving forward, What do I do all day in academia? I simply do my work. Especially these days, my work is to impact the educational programs and students or research and in their future. And undergraduate research is really important here at my university, but that is part of our culture here to prepare students for hands-on experience. And of course, we do also work with graduate students, and we work with honors program and multidisciplinary programs, as well as many other contributions and collaborations across the university. Really, when you think about academic world, it is an opportunity for you to get to know many people and many disciplines and many people to collaborate and be part of a really exciting circumstances and exciting environment. So I really now think about the future of engineering and future engineers and technology professionals. As I mature in my career, being a researcher and now focusing more on undergraduate education, I keep thinking, not every one of these students are going to be research students, and probably 90% of them really will get a job in industry and will be the future engineering professionals or technology professionals. So those are kind of what I do and work with the university, work with programs, and continue to enhance our offerings to the students. So you may ask, why we choose an academic career? For me, it was really, I was excited about the opportunities, as well as I was really excited about learning. I am still excited about learning. And simply the academic career allows someone to learn something new every single day, and it builds confidence. And it's important to develop important to the development of business program tool or infrastructure. And that's what you do. You really, when you are in academia, your program is really just you are the leader of that particular project. And professors, it's their job to educate and to educate the future engineers. We do educational programs, we do research, and to be able to get promoted in our career, we have to show that we continuously make progress. Just like you students making progress in their classes to show and earn that grade that you want. Graduate students really do this work and be part of the academic career to get a better job and interested in learning. And moving forward, and so pretty much you applied for graduate school and you're doing your research, and then you finish your work, and what is next? And now you finish your research, then you have to defend it, and what is next? And that is always going to be a question for you. And in academia, every single day is a question, what is next? Because you will have proposals and you will write your proposals, you will get grants, and that project will be funded, and you will work on it, and the money will be spent, and you will still have to have other questions to answer. You're writing more proposals. So you continuously work in academia. It is your work, it is your project, it is your ideas, and it is your creation. So that is really, the academia is a platform for you to learn new technologies and disseminate those new technologies. This could be either along the way, you also teach future engineers. That's your job. You have to learn and you have to teach. So when you start your career, that's what you do. You say, okay, so I have to understand that I have to do research, and you have to understand that I have to do teaching. So it's the two jobs, really. It's not just one. If you went to in industry, they will give you a task and you will do that task, and your supervisor say yes, no, and then you go to the next task. But in academia, you are the boss. But you have to use that being a boss very carefully and very consciously, that understand your job is twofold. One, to teach the next generation of engineers. And second is you continuously learn so you can bring the new technologies to these young engineers or engineering candidates so they would be prepared in future careers. So how do you find the job? If you want to be in academia, how do you find a job? You look at others with similar experience or similar interest in academia. You have to search for that. And I remember for me, and looking at, of course, I'm really old. In my case, we didn't have internet, we didn't have online anything. However, we did have printed magazines, printed brochures, and printed catalogs, and that's what we did. We spent a lot of time at the university's library, looking through those catalogs and finding people, looking through those journals, finding projects, topics that are relevant to us. And with that, you continue to contact these people and you just open your arms. It says, I'm here to learn. Can you teach me? And eventually somebody will reach out to you and says, oh yeah, it's really interesting what you did. And maybe you can come and give us a talk. Why not, right? So you need to visit other research groups and facilities, fund companies to value your work. So you can write proposals for those companies so they would fund your research in academia. And you have to be really focused on what you want to do. And I understand some of you are not PhD students, some of you are still master's students. As a master's student, you have to ask this question: do I really want to go to academic career? Do I want to get a job? If it is an academic career, you have to continue with PhD. If it is an industrial job, or if it is if you want to get a job outside the academia, then you stop. You still can get PhD, but your PhD work is going to be related to what you actually have learned in your master's. And then you go to more industry-oriented projects in your PhD work so that you can carry that talent and knowledge to industry. So you set the goals, you set your assignments, and you set your expectations. And in graduate school, expectations are set by your PI, but once you make the decision, you set your expectations. What do you want? What are my expectations from me? That is the question that you need to answer. So once you determine that, then you continue. So you transition from the graduate student to professional. And so you keep thinking about, how do I make that transition? That is so important. I remember when I finished my PhD, it was unusual circumstances, and I didn't make a decision very quickly, and I didn't know what I was going to do, and so I had to stay for another 2 years in my current institution as a postdoc to figure out and also help my lab mates to get their degrees. So it took me a really long time to make that decision and transition. But for many of you, it may not be that long. It could be quicker. It might be, actually, it is advisable that it should be quicker. You have to make that decision very quickly so you can move on, right? So you have to start with your professional development, and you have to start writing your CV. That's very, very important. Every single activity you have, it has to go onto that CV. It doesn't matter how small it is. You have to put it on your curriculum vitae or your resume. Eventually, you can filter some information out for a specific job or specific academic career, but you have to write every single thing. If you were invited to give a talk at an HKN section, write it down. If you were invited to visit a lab, write it down. If you met with some people to help you to understand your topics, write it down. If you attended a conference, write it down. If you publish papers, of course, you have to write that down. If you have a certificate program, a certificate on a specific project or program, write it down. Everything has to go to that. If you're a volunteer for HKN, if you're a president of your chapter or secretary, it has to go on there. Because once you start looking for a job, whatever that job is, including academia, people want to see more rounded candidates these days. They want the candidates not just book smart, but also street smart, meaning that you need to be social, you need to be academically inclined, and you need to be a good student with good grades, and you need to publish your work. That's what people are looking for, especially if the academic career is in your target. That's what you need to do. You have to take ownership of your own research and own your career, okay, and your journey. And of course, you have to find a mentor. Mentorship is so important. Find a mentor. It doesn't matter if it is organized or not organized. It has to be a part of your career. I'm almost at the end of my career. I still have mentors. Of course, my mentors are in different level. I still have coaches, mentors, and colleagues to discuss things. You always have to have some form of mentor, your friends, your colleagues, your supervisor, your research professors, anybody, okay? And you have many questions, you have to ask those questions. And how do you do all these? And you have to find ways to do it. So one way to answer some of your questions is being part of HKN, or being part of IEEE, or being part of a group that you always have to go back and ask questions. It doesn't matter which group you are, you got to ask those questions. So an academic interview, like, it is so challenging these days, finding an academic job. Remember, universities are not hiring in bulk, meaning university cannot say in a department, oh, today we have many students, we're going to hire 5 faculty members. No. Maybe 1 position is open in 1 department at a given year. And you have to be very careful, look at it. For that 1 job, the universities are getting hundreds of applications. So you have to think about it. What makes you better than the next candidate? What value do you have to offer to that university if the academic career is what you want? So you need to look at their advertisements very carefully, and you need to judge your qualifications to what the university is looking for, and tailor your CV, your resume. Remember, and I said, write everything down. Some of those things that you wrote down is not going to be relevant to the people that you're trying to get a job with, right? So you may want to take those out. So you highlight the most important part on your CV that matches to that job description. So, and that's really the key, okay? And you need to also use your talent from research. You don't realize when you do research at the university, you already gain a lot of independent thinking. You already have a lot of curiosity built, and you have a lot of ideas that you can foster. You need to think about those. And you need to bring them as your future work when you are interviewing and when you are going to apply for a job. That is very important. And you also need to stick to your core research in your PhD work. That always will stay with you. My PhD work was in optics, and I was never an active researcher, but every so often I go back and do a research in optics. And I did find areas related to optic at the edges and at the corners of optics area that cross links or overlaps. And for example, I studied laser later on, and studying laser and my optic interest, and I was able to combine those two to be able to do spectroscopy related research. And knowing lasers and knowing plasma physics, and I was able to use that plasma physics to understand electrical discharges and breakdown of dielectric materials that I did the work for NASA. So you always go back to your core research values and pull from that. So you need to think about the long-term goal in your research. It's not just today, finish the project and be done. It's not. And I know it feels like it, but it's not. So as an engineer with a master's or PhD, you will be in a world of research, and many technologies we have are initiated by research at academic institution, developed by industry and driven by public policies and uses. So you gotta think about it. What is my calling? Am I going to do public policy, or am I going to do product development, or am I going to stay in basic research? If the answer is continuously learning something and continuously discovering something, then you probably want to be in basic research. That means you're more inclined to do academic research. You're going to be an academician. If your goal is to develop products based on the research some other people done, then maybe your calling is to go to the industry. So you can gauge what you want to do based on that as well. So, and many students ask me how useful is a PhD for an engineer who wants to do an engineering job. So I'm going to skip this. Then simply because this episode focuses on academia and how you find a job in academia, where you go from here. And you can look at this later on. But in summary, you have to have a plan. It's never too late to make a plan. Use the resources that are available to you, and that includes co-workers, your advisors, your mentors, even your family. Use those. And you believe in yourself that you can do it. Hey, remember, you finish high school, you decided to be an engineer, you finish your engineering career, engineering degree, now you're in graduate school. You are pretty much 1% of the population that picked that path. Remember that. Probably 1% of the population picked this path. So it means that you are very special. I get it, it's difficult. It's difficult to me even these days, but it is always going to be difficult wherever you go, whatever you do. But you always have to remember, you're probably 1% of the population picked this path. Remember, we have 7 billion in the world. And how many PhDs out there? Just think about that, okay? So, and when you choose academic career, you need to ask yourself, do you enjoy research? Is academia the only avenue for this? And I answered that question. If you're interested in basic research, yes. And really, especially STEM PhDs are in high demand in industry. You will be tempted by the salaries and etc. But that shouldn't be the case. And as an engineer, so having an engineering PhD really opens a lot of doors. But I get it, it is difficult, but you can do it. So, and I added these also. How do you prepare for an academic job? Do you like students? And have you done any teaching while you're a graduate student? If you haven't yet, and if academic career is what you want, maybe ask your supervisor to teach some classes for him. You will get some experience that is so important when you're interviewing for a job. Do you enjoy research? Do you enjoy doing independent research? Remember, once you get an academic job, your research will be you. You will be the PI. Each time you get a project, that project is a small business. You have to have business mind. How do you run this business? You're going to hire graduate students. You're going to purchase equipment. You're going to purchase supplies. You're going to write papers, and you're going to attend conferences. That's a business. You need to have a business mind, right? And do you like nonstop learning? You need to ask that. Do you? I do. I continuously read, and you have to, because there's always something new coming up. For the last few years, being in a department chair, being in academia, and I am really behind my reading. And I did some work in aerospace industry, aerospace power systems. And pretty much what I did in 20 years ago is the foundation of electric airplanes. And I am so behind how much that technology has developed since then, since we first proposed the possibility of using using a battery-powered power system for space. That was a challenging task at the time, but now there's a lot of technologies. Every single day you see a car that is similar to space. It is, when I say space, it's a harsh environment. Car is another harsh environment, but different kind, right? So what we laid out at NASA with the engineers, with my work, and we were able to, provide pathway for other opportunities. So you have to think about it. You did that project 20 years ago, you're seeing its fruits today. So those are the good things. You need to say, do I want that? Is that what my calling is? Yes, right? And do you want to do extra challenging work? The reason I see that, hey, engineers are, in terms of intellectual power, pretty powerful. Pretty much every engineer's IQ is pretty high, and we learn very quick. But that's how we learn. We're really good in math. We start in middle school, start in elementary school. You're always the best student in your class, and middle school and high school, and then you come to college, you probably were best student in college. But there are other best students, right? So eventually you get to a point and you said, I'm the best. No, you're not. You go to a conference and you see a paper and says, oh my God, I'm not the smartest person in the world, right? So you need to remember that. Even though you probably think that you know everything, you don't. And you need to respect other people. And you also need to challenge yourself. That's why extra challenging work, that's important. Do you like that? That's academia. It is continuously competition. It's continuously improving yourself. It's continuously creating knowledge. You have to create that knowledge for your students. These are undergraduate students. They will remember you 20 years from now. I still have students, and they're following me on LinkedIn, or sometimes I get this, hello, Dr. Kirkici, how are you? At an airport. I don't even remember. And that person says, oh, you taught me circuits class. right? So those are the kind of things that you do. You impact the future engineers. You have to remember that. Now, pay scale. Everything is great. Everything is challenging. You learn a lot, but pay scale. Is money more important for you? If it is, academia is not for you. Okay? No university will pay you as much as an industry professional can earn. And I remember my first PhD student got a job with GE, and at the time the offer they made him was almost equal to what I was making as a professor, right? So it's the fact, and I was so glad for him that he got that job, and he's doing awesome. If that is the reason, the money, then you have to think differently. So you have to also think about prospect of career growth and salary potential, and what can you do with it, etc. Okay. And so you also have options. So you said, okay, I'm going to do academic career. Your options could be what I picked, which is a postdoc or tenure track. How do you choose? I didn't choose it. It just happened that way. The circumstances, restricted me to stay at the institution I was, and my advisor wasn't available to continue helping our team. So I was the most senior student in the team, my lab mates, and I was drafted to make sure that our team, our group, and our students graduated successfully. So that was not the choice I made, but I'm glad I did, simply because it gave me additional skills. It gave me opportunity to be responsible. It gave me an opportunity to be an independent. And then I got a tenure track position at Auburn, at a different university. So how do you choose? Where do you go? What do you do? And in that case, it just happened that Auburn University had another research associate position open, strictly work on a research project that was the Space Power Systems project. Based on my PhD work, lasers and pulse power systems that I learned, that's what they needed. And they asked me to apply, and I applied for 1 year. I was there for a 3-year appointment. I was there only 1 year as a postdoc, and the electrical and computer engineering department says, hey, we want you to be a tenure track professor here. And I accepted. So I spent that. So I didn't have a lot of interview experience. I was just lucky. But before that, I sent out hundreds of CVs, and nothing panned out. And simply because I just didn't know how to present myself. I didn't have a mentor to teach me how to prepare myself for interviews. And I didn't do well. So it is important. You have to prepare yourself for interviews. Once you choose which school you want to go, and once you know which schools you want to apply, you have to be prepared for interview. If you get it or not, it is irrelevant. You have to be prepared. And you need to know what to expect. You need to study the university, the college that you're going into, and the department you're going into, and the faculty in the department. If you find or if you feel some flag that may not be for you, that place may not be for you, then you have the option to either accept the interview or not. And you can still go for an interview as an experience, and you ask your questions. So going for an interview doesn't mean that you have to accept that job, right? But you have to be prepared. So you have to have a mentor to teach you all these things. You have to always look for colleagues and friends to collaborate with you. And you have to have support system. And platforms like this, HKN, GradLab, and other platforms within HKN and IEEE, they are great places for all of you to be able to get these helps and talk to them. For example, I'm always open to talk to students. It doesn't matter if they are our students at the university or not. I'm always available via chat, on email or Zoom. If anybody has any questions, they can casually send me an email. I will try to answer them as much as I know. But you need to make the first contact. It's up to you to shape your world. Okay. And with that, thank you so much. And let's open it for, I didn't expect to speak this long, but let's open it for some questions.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Kirkici. It was fantastic to hear more about your experiences and perceptions on academia. As Hulya said, now starts our Q&A session. So if you have any questions you'd like to ask to Hulya, definitely feel free to unmute yourself and ask.
And I am going to stop sharing my screen so I can see my screen.
And I'll ask one right now just to get us started. Can you talk a little bit more about what it's like to navigate grant culture in academia? I really liked your business metaphor, and as you know, business needs backers. So how do you keep your research flexible enough to attract consistent grants to keep that money going?
It's very difficult. So when I was first starting out and I was told, you write grants, the money you have is for your not current grant, but for your future grant. So using the funding that you have, you generate data for future grant. And you write proposal for that future grant. And you do the job, but you also use your data to establish the next proposal. Getting the first grant is the hardest because you're not known. You don't know how to write. You don't know what to focus. And it's okay to submit multiple proposals. So in my case, in fact, a few years ago when I was moving to South Alabama, I cleaned out my office and I realized that I was writing a proposal every single month. Can you imagine I was doing all that work every single month? I probably had my first couple of years, I had about 15 to 20 proposals a year. That's a lot. That is a lot of proposal, and it wasn't working. And simply because I wasn't looking at the reviewers' comments, and I didn't know where to pick to submit my proposals to. So once you figure that out, then it's easy. And it just happened that I figured that out. And from now on, my success rate to get funded was close to 100%. Every single proposal I wrote got funded.
That's awesome. Thanks for letting me know. And we do have a couple of questions in the chat. First one comes from Shakul. Are there job opportunities for full-time research positions with a master's thesis in university?
Some universities do that. Some universities call that research associates or research collaborators, and some universities do, but most universities will have a, it's simply because of the financial, because these research students are paid through the grants, and grants usually don't pay for staff. And grants usually pay for postdoc researchers. They don't pay for master's researchers as an employee.
And we have another question from Teresa. Is it possible to be an employee in industry and at the same time be an independent researcher in the university?
That's a little bit tricky, and it is a competing organizations, industry and university. And industry normally have their information to be kept confidential. and they would not want you to go off to do research on a similar base at a different institution. Now, if your work at an industry is not research related, but you can sign up as a part-time student at a university and you can do research that way.
Great, awesome. I'll pause for a moment and see, does anyone else have any questions they want to put in the chat or unmute and ask?
I have a question. Thanks, Dr. Hulya, for a good presentation. I enjoyed it. So what are some skills that you absolutely need as a professor and that can be developed like during your PhD? Like what can I do to be a better individual as I'm graduating and more prepared?
I think the most important thing is have a good personality. You may not feel like you want to be smiling. You may not feel like you want to be nice on that day. Maybe you're having a bad day, but you just cannot let that show to the students. They pick up on that very quickly. And they take it personal. Even if it is your personal matters and you're not feeling well, students pick up on that really quickly and they take it personal. So that's number one. You always have to have good personality and be approachable to students, be approachable to faculty. In my case, I always had open door policy. And my students early on complained that I was, they were not able to make office hours. That's why they were not coming to my office hours. And I said, oh, well, why don't I have an open door policy? And I just said, anytime drop by. Not single student stop by the next few years. So, and there were no complaints. So they want to feel like you're approachable, you're there, you will listen, you will be one of their friend. And of course, you have to keep the distance. But yeah, as a department chair, it's a little bit tricky. Students come to me about complaining about faculty, their professors. So you have to be able to find a balance as an administrator, and you have to listen to both sides of the story, and you don't make any judgment immediately, and you find a way to manage and make sure that both parties are happy. And this happened to me as a faculty member, and now it's happening as a department chair. And I listen all sorts of problems. I listen to, male students breaking up with girlfriends, and female students, having boyfriend problems, and also all sorts of things that they come and talk to me because they feel they're comfortable, and I will keep their confidence. So being approachable is important.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Hulya.
Sure.
So we talked a little bit about doing or getting consistent grants and using your research to set up the NETS grant. But what happens if you approach a research subject, you do the 5 years of research, and just as an example, oh no, we don't discover the magnetic monopole, and you don't get the results that you're looking for? How do you recover and bounce back from setbacks like that?
That's okay. You need to steer your. So I was when I was doing my PhD work, and I was not getting the answer I was expecting, and my advisor said, unexpected results, bad results is still a result. You have to present that. And so there is no bad results. There's only what you expected to find, you didn't find. Okay. Instead, you found something else. Maybe you didn't find that because it doesn't exist. Right? So if it is the case, then you have to be able to defend that. So you have to be able to steer the knowledge that you gain from that 5-year project, chasing after one goal to a different goal. What did you do? You didn't get to that goal, but what did you do? You didn't stay there. I'm sure you created some other knowledge. What did you do with that knowledge? And how can you utilize that knowledge to make something else? That's the important part. Yeah, you have to be re-engineer, reshape, and redesign that project. After all, we're engineers, we know how to design, right?
Thank you. I appreciate that response.
Now I'm going to come back to how to prepare yourself to be in academia. There is no good way to do that. You have to have that mindset. You have to talk to people. What do I expect? What am I getting into? What should I be prepared? And really, only you can make that decision. But you have to ask those questions. So if you haven't taught as a graduate student, start teaching. Start getting experience. If you did teach in the lab, that's great. And ask your PI or your department chair if you can substitute for lectures. Teaching a lab versus teaching a lecture is different. And you're a grader, you can ask if you're a grader, and you can ask whoever your grader if you can substitute 1 or 2 lectures for them. So you have to have that experience delivering the lecture. Teaching is most important. Very few people get promoted being a good teacher, but a lot of people get fired being a bad teacher. Okay? You need to remember, and you need to know the difference. Being a good teacher is not going to get you anywhere. But being a bad teacher, if you don't pay attention to your students and students complain all the time, then you can get fired.
Great. We have a couple more minutes. Does anyone else have a question they'd like to ask Dr. Kirkici?
I do have one more question.
Yeah, please
Thanks,
go for
Dr.
it.
Hulya. That was insightful. And you did mention a lot of different things that you do as a person in academia, as a professor, as a chair, like writing grants, research, teaching. Like, how do you manage time, and how do you remain focused at one thing when you're doing that thing?
Yeah, it's challenging. It's challenging simply making that transition, having only one project to focus on as a graduate student and jumping into an academic world. It's very difficult. It takes 2-3 years to make that transition. Multitasking. If you have a partner in life, and that partner needs to be understanding and help you. And if both of you are academic careers, then you need to help each other take turns. And you need to have a support system. You need to have resources to take care of your personal matters. And that is the most important. We get so distracted with the personal matters, especially female faculty. Is so important. We are inclined to be more caretakers, and we tend to pay more attention to classes to take care of our students. And we tend to focus on family more to take care of family. You need to make a conscious decision that this is a partnership with your partner, and you have an equal responsibility. It's not your own job to take care of the family. If that's the case, then you need to talk to your department chair and see what type of allocations they can provide. Many schools have this work balance trainings that you can attend, and many schools actually allow some form of work home balance opportunities.
Great. And we have a question in the chat from Teresa. How can I find a mentor?
Talk to Joe. And HKN runs a mentorship program, and please follow HKN website or emails or whatever, and they will connect you with a mentor, or just ask somebody. That's what I did. I never had a formal mentorship program to participate, and I see someone at a meeting, and I said, I ask questions. Next time I asked them to have coffee, and then next time I said, well, can we have lunch? And then I asked them my personal questions or professional questions, and I said, I need help. Can you help? Most of the time, people will advise you, but don't have just one. Several. Don't listen to one person. You have to make that decision, which one is the best for you. And you have to have several mentors.
I definitely agree with that. Do you mind if I build on that for a second, Hulya?
Yes.
Oh, fantastic. So just to follow up on Hulya's comment, I also design and run HKN's mentoring program designed to link graduate students with working professionals in either industry or academia. We actually just launched our program for this year last month, but I'll put my email in the chat. If you want to send me an email, I can send you the application form and see if one of our mentors has some extra bandwidth for you. But either way, just working in that program and seeing the impact it's been able to have, not just on the mentees, but the mentors themselves by forming a personal connection and being invested in another person has been profound. I've seen it lead to friendships. I've seen it lead to life advice. I've seen it lead to internships. Honestly, having a mentor is one of the best things you can do at any stage of your career. And actually last year, Hulya was one of our mentors, and her mentees had the most wonderful things to say about her. So that's a great question, and definitely follow up with me and HKN to see if we can't help you find someone. Okay, cool. Does anyone else have any last questions for Hulya? All right, I'll ask just one more thing to end off on. What's the best and worst aspect about being in academia, in your opinion?
Oh, long hours is the worst aspect. Even I remember I remember spending 12 to 14 hours days, 7 days a week, and doing this several years in a row. Sometimes it gets old. It gets very, very tiring. This is not a compliment to me, but I'm somewhat a perfectionist, and I want to do the job the best I can do, and I keep going, doing and doing, and so it's not a good thing. At some point, you need to take time off. The best part is that you set your own agenda. You are in charge. You decide which funds which grants to apply. You decide what type of research you're going to do. You decide what to learn. And in fact, you can take time off here and there by working long hours other times. So that's the best part. And the worst part, like I said, it is once you get that habit of learning, and it's a disease, and you just cannot get rid of it. There's no drugs. Yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. And once again, thank you for your wonderful presentation and perspectives. And thank you for everyone for joining our live Q&A. It was a lot of fun to engage with you. For now, I'll say thank you everyone for attending. And if you have any further questions, I put my email in the chat here. But let's all just thank Hulya one more time for her time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Joe. This was great. I enjoyed it.